I found this cool write up about you and your process, and it said that you assemble your lyrics using past and present thoughts from a book of phrases he has fancied over the years,
Yeah.
um, which I thought was pretty fascinating. And I'm wondering, how do you make that hodgepodge coalesce into something that is a song with a through line?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's really kind of like I try to use what I'm thinking about or ruminating about now as much as possible. Or when I hear a new guitar riff from Worth, a lot of times it'll immediately inspire something that I hope and intend to like embody the way the music sounds, so that the words, because I don't want the personality of the words to be different than the
Hmm.
personality of the instrumentation. So I'll usually come up with a number of like fresh things, like a fresh idea, and to the point where I understand what the song is supposed to be about, and the voice and the character of the song.
Hmm.
Um, and then a lot of times, if I get stuck on something, or if I just need like a little jolt of inspiration, I'll go back into those archives of mine, because over the years I've written a ton of stuff, like one-liners, or I'll have like a verse that I've written for something here that all makes sense together, and I forget about these things a lot, but they are relevant to, and you know, I guess technically a lot of times it's like the same feeling that I was feeling back then, I'll be writing about now. And
Hmm.
it's like the words that I was missing back then, I've found now. And the words that I've forgotten about now, I can find back then. And so you're right, it is a bit of a hodgepodge, especially just methodology. But I think it works out, because a lot of the things that I want to say now, I've wanted to say for a long time, apparently, because there's still remnants of them in those books, and it just kind of helps like fill in the gaps if you're having like a lapse in creative ambition or whatever, or something's just
Hmm.
not coming to you. I can go read that stuff, and I won't always take it verbatim from what I wrote years ago,
Yeah.
but like the cadence and the phonetics of what I wrote years ago will kind of get reinvented as I apply it to this current idea.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's because this other band I work with, the Fabulous Thunderbirds, Kim Wilson, he has this thing where he says, you never throw away old songs. He's like, it's like a car that you keep in the yard for spare parts.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, yeah, which sounds very much like what you were doing with, oh, okay, there's got to be something in here that fits with this.
Yeah.
Um, and I also love the fact that, so does that apply to every song where it's like you don't start putting down words or assigning words to it until you've heard the melody that Worth has come up with?
No, I mean, a lot of times what'll happen is he will come up with like the bed of guitars and basses and stuff, and he'll kind of demo out his instrumental idea for a song, and I'll start listening to it and gathering ideas for it. And that's how I would say it happens like 80% of the time.
Hmm.
The other 20% of the time, I'll already have like an idea for a chorus that I know I want to do, and
Hmm.
so we'll do that in reverse. It's like, here's my melody and lyrics for this chorus. Can you now come up with the bed of instrumentation that goes under it?
Right, right. Okay. And um I'm always curious about how musicians talk to each other about their different ideas, and what kind of language do you use when you're describing what you want from a guitar piece. I mean, do you just often play it, or is there kind of a shorthand that you guys have developed where you said, well, something like this, but with a little bit of this thrown in?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have Worth and I have worked together a lot over the past number of years, in the studio and just sitting on the couch writing unofficially. But so we have kind of developed a shorthand. And more so than a shorthand, it's really just like we don't get offended by each other's ideas. Like if, and this has happened a lot recently because we've been working on a new record, and he's come to me with a ton of ideas, and he'll be like, "Yeah, this whole thing is great, except this one part. It's like I like the meat of what is there, but something's not quite jiving." And I'm
Mm.
able to pick up a guitar or even just hum like a, well, what if you tried changing the rhythm to this,
Mhm.
emphasis to this instead of what's there now, or try quarter notes instead of eighth notes, or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there is some technical terminology and nothing insanely deep. I'm not the guy that can spout off like weird chord names and voicing,
Right.
that sort of thing. But we've between us figured a way to just kind of say what we think would make the part better or the best it can be, and not get offended by the fact that your original idea was great, but maybe not the full vision. And he does that to
Mhm.
me all the time too. Like I'll be in the studio tracking vocals to something that we've written the music for, and I'll have this idea that'll be great, but not quite like he's like, I just need this out of it. Like try it like
Mhm.
this or change the rhythm to that. And we've just figured out how to like trust each other, not get offended, and know that we have a common interest. We're not trying to like bash one another by giving feedback. It's just their common goal is to make this the best it can be. So if one of us is suggesting something, the other one knows that that's the place it's coming from.
Right, right. And what makes it extra interesting is just some of these songs have a lot of different elements in them on the Prose EP. And it's kind of this cool surprise because sometimes, like you start a song and then you guys come in like full force and it's like, oh, it's one of these types of bands. And then you take this left turn, into something completely different. And it's like, okay, I did not see that one coming,
Yeah.
and so, like the New Teeth song,
Hmm.
you know, I would say it's not often you come across a song that I would classify as hard rock that you could also dance to. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Oh, for
And
sure.
yeah, and that definitely fits, both of those areas. And so it's like, okay, does that were you trying to create something, different and that stands out in that way, or is that just what happens when your brain starts cycling through things?
Yeah, man, I don't know if I have all the answers on that one, but I think the best that I could do is I know that we have and have always had an affinity for heavy rock. So we do like to bash people over the head with heavy riffs and that sort of thing, and lots of energy. But we also both have like a deep appreciation and like secret love affair with pop music.
Mhm.
So I think it's just like inevitable that all those different influences come out. Because I don't think that Worth is ever setting out specifically to, I'm going to write a song that you can dance to, but he just gets an idea that won't leave his head. And then he knows it's time to, he's like, well, I've been thinking about this idea for 3 weeks straight and can't get it out of my head. So it must be worth me putting it down on the record. And so just kind of whatever comes out, we make sure that it fits our overall sound, because there's a
Mhm.
lot of different ways a song like that could go. New Teeth specifically, you could, instead of having high gain guitars, you could level them down to where they're a little more clean, and
Mhm.
it could be more synth heavy, and kind of veer away from the side of the Venn diagram that says hard rock and more
Yeah.
into the side that says pop or dance. Um, but we kind of try to keep it right there in that middle portion of the Venn diagram, so that there's something for everybody. We don't want to push people too far in one direction and miss out on good audience members.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it cool and different and interesting, and nothing against people that just go straight ahead hard rock, but,
Sure.
I like the fact that you guys don't okay, this is our lane, and we're not allowed to move out of it in any way, even when inspiration strikes.
Right.
And I think that's what, and I always encourage people to listen to an entire album, and just let yourself just soak in it, because there's all these different little surprises as you take people through it. And like another one that really stood out to me was Carousel. It has this
Mhm.
great soulful groove, that introduces it, and that's kind of the backing to it. And I'm wondering, do you remember how that groove came about?
Man, that was another Worth brainchild that just kind of like he just was, I guess, in the studio one night, and he had been working on something, and he was texting us that he was working on something, and the next morning he just sent us the fleshed out demo. And I don't think that one changed a whole lot. I mean, when we do a demo, you know, I'll eventually get vocals down on it once I've heard the demo enough and have all the ideas, and then he'll go back and replace the guitars with like final takes and tweak anything that has started to bother him in the meantime. But as far as I can remember, that was just one of those ones that he just texted us one morning and was like, "Okay, here it is. Here's the song." Um, and I started writing vocals to it. And I remember the working title for that song was Maroon Fünf, like Maroon Five,
Yeah.
because we knew it was kind of like a weird, like a stepchild of the record, like
Okay.
didn't quite do what the rest of the songs were doing, but was still punchy enough, in the chorus, and emotional enough here and there to like still fit the bill, but kind of be a little bit of an outlier on the record.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other great aspect of songs like that is, um it really shows you have quite the vocal range, because within the same song you'll be like soft and mellow and easing people into it, and then there's this full throated emotional release scream at times.
Yeah.
um and were you always comfortable, swinging from one end of the spectrum vocally like that, or has that developed over time?
Yeah, I don't know if I was always comfortable swinging that way, but it was something that was always needed in any of the bands that I've been in, really. For the most part, have all they've most of the bands I've been in over the years have been what you would consider hard rock, or emo, or whatever, on the
Hmm.
harder end of the spectrum. Um, but they've always had those verses that dip down and are really sentimental, or is supposed to be sexy, or whatever. They've always called for that sort of vocal dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, I will say, so as far as have I always been comfortable doing that, I've been comfortable like pushing myself to do that.
Hmm.
But in the past, I don't think I've always hit the mark as well as I do now, and I feel a lot more comfortable with it now. I've
Hmm.
always enjoyed writing songs that swing that far, but just say as the years have gone on and I've worked on my voice a lot more, it has become physically more comfortable for sure.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because it's there's times where it's like this vocal gymnastics where it's like, wow, I've really got to bounce back and forth to extremes within one song.
Yeah.
And I mean, has there been times like it's like, well, it really fits the song, but what the hell was I thinking? Because this is hard to do live.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that has only been remedied by diligent practice. Um,
Hmm.
because you're right, you're in the studio and you want to make it just as epic as it can possibly be, but on the low end of the spectrum and on the heavy end of the spectrum. And you're right, that catches up to you when you go to finally sing it live, all at once and in the heat of the moment, when your blood's pumping, and you're running out of breath and things change. But yeah, we just whenever we go out and do shows, I spend weeks just every night running the set list front to back, no stops, just the way that we'll do it live, and it's just a lot of conditioning for that very reason that you mentioned.
Oh, okay. No, that's really interesting that kind of there's a pre-tour workout you go
Oh yeah,
through.
absolutely.
Wow. Okay. All right. Have you always done that? Or again, was that just something that someone taught you or you learned like, this is a good way to get in shape for what's to come?
No, I mean, I can't say I've always done it to this extent.
Mhm.
When I was younger, I mean, I've always been pretty careful and vigilant about what's going on in the vocal region.
Yeah.
Um, but I just over the years, it's like, I'm not getting younger, and the hardware's showing some age. So I need to keep it as fresh as I can, and I've just have realized the importance of doing that when it comes to the longevity of an individual performance and the longevity of your ability to perform over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So I've always been hyper aware of, warming up or, going for runs, building up my cardiovascular stamina and that sort of thing. But I just take it a lot more seriously now. Whereas before I wouldn't have said it was like a pre-tour workout, like pre-tour conditioning or anything. It would, like, I would
Yeah.
pay attention to it, and I wouldn't be an idiot and be smoking all the time or screaming all the time and that sort of thing. But now it's all that plus actual physical exercise and repetitive, going over the set, making sure the muscle memory's there and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then, coming back around to the yin and yang of all that you guys create, I found this other cool line in another interview you did where you said, we wanted the music to have pretty undertones and to often act as a wall of sound, which on the face of it, they sound contradictory. I mean, it sounds like two things that cannot exist within the same space. And yet, again, you go through Carousel and some of these songs, and it's like, okay, I see what he was talking about,
Hmm.
because they have both of those elements. What's the key though to having one song where both of those aspects play nicely?
Yeah, a lot of it is the final mix of those elements.
Hmm.
Not trying to put all those elements right in your face, right in your ears all the time. But it's one of those things where, so if you're listening to a song like Weeping Season, which is, I would say, probably one of the heavier tracks, more aggressive tracks on the record, the first thing that you're actually hearing as a listener the first time you listen to it are those heavy chunky chords that are kind of driving the song. But if you could go into our Pro Tools session and take those away and listen to what's underneath it, there is this wash of much cleaner guitars,
Mm.
um, with a lot of like drippy reverbs and delays on them that kind of just create this. It's like it puts you in the bubble of the song, and
Hmm.
those things are always somewhat constant. Whereas the big heavy riffs that are louder in the mix, the first thing you hear will change and move the song along. Those sort of washy, prettier elements are just kind of, yeah, a wall underneath everything.
Hmm. Okay. And it also, I don't know, hearing a musician talk about hard rock ever use the term pretty undertones before.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's like, all right, well, here's a guy who's secure in his, hard rock manhood that he can, throw out terms like this and know it's not going to be misconstrued, or just honest enough to go, no, we want some stuff in here that's pretty,
Yeah.
and
It's got to be pretty,
yeah.
all the pretty things.
um and then going back to the words and the lyrics, so one of my favorites that I picked out from this was, it's in the song Teenage Lines, and it's toward the beginning of the song where you sing how you were reaching for the stars again and only pulling down the empty things that were sitting in between,
Hmm.
which um I thought was great. I don't know, I just immediately kind of got an image or a sense of what that was about, at least within my world, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, what a wonderful way to phrase that. And I'm wondering if you remember how that lyric came about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Yeah, that song to me, and I like that you said, you know what that means in your world, because that's kind of what you want, right? Is you want people to be able to take it and apply it to their life and extrapolate whatever meaning they need from it. So that's good to
Yeah.
know. I appreciate hearing that from you. But to me, I was writing about somebody who was constantly frustrated that they were they had very large ambitions in life, and it seemed like no matter what they did, the payoff wasn't there.
Mhm.
So that's sort of where that one came from for me.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and the reason I, phrased it that way is just, because I've spoken with so many musicians that, like you, like to they're not so rigid about a tune, and they like the fact that different people can use it or feel it in different ways.
Hmm.
Um, and so I never try and press, musicians for like, all right, what is this song about? Unless it's really, far out there. Um, but I also think that's an art form to be able to create lyrics where people can, as others have said, find their way into a song.
Hmm.
Um, and again, is that conscious, or is that did it just evolve from writing over and over and over again?
I guess yeah, there's definitely a conscious effort there, but that conscious effort for me has been there since I was 12 years old in writing songs, and I definitely wasn't always hitting the mark
Mhm.
at that age. So it's a combination, really. I know I mean, that's kind of like the easy way out with this answer, right? But it's like it's like kind of a combination of you want that to be the intention. You set out for that to be your goal, and it still takes a ton of practice, just like learning an instrument in the first place. You know,
Yeah.
you want to be able to play kick-ass solos, but it's going to take a minute to get from point A
Right.
to B.
Yeah. And then also I'm wondering, because you talked about you get ideas, snippets, and you write them down in this book, and they're all, they're there in case you need them, and maybe there's not an immediate application. Have there been times when you've thought of a particular phrase or a line or two where you're like, this sounds really good. I don't know what it means, but it sounds really good.
For sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of nonsense in those books that aren't it's not readily coming to mind, but oh, absolutely. It's like, and I don't know what the inspiration for that is. Maybe you're just walking around people watching or something, and
Yeah.
a cool phrase pops into your head, and it has like a unique little rhyme to it or something. But you go back and read it, and you're like, what was this possibly even about? I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's so much nonsense written down in those books on top of, and well, and that's kind of the cool part, right? It's like sometimes I'll use the nonsense because when I write it, I don't necessarily know what it means at the time. I just know that it sounds cool. But
Mhm.
years later, when I stumble across like a solid idea for a song, and I go back and read through those books, I'm like, oh my god, that line that I always thought was nonsense heavily applies to everything else that I've been writing this week. So
Right, right.
somehow finds its way
Yeah.
back around sometimes. But
Okay. Yeah. It's almost like the subconscious is churning through all the stuff that, you've been taking in, and it's maybe a step or two ahead of you.
yeah, honestly, great way to put it.
Okay. Okay. And then I read that, from what I read, this particular EP was a long time in the making. With these songs, being created over years.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm wondering, first off, how have you guys changed as a band in the course of making this, in the years that it took to put this out?
Um, you know, we've definitely so things like I was saying earlier, where we've sort of developed that shorthand when we're in the studio, and the relationship, like the working relationship, has definitely developed. It was always pretty effortless, but it that
Hmm.
continues to get easier and easier all the time. So the workflow has definitely evolved a lot, and we've gotten to, I don't know, it's gotten to be a more subconscious thing. Like we know where we're coming from with certain ideas. We almost know what to expect, but are still surprised by, the next part of the song that we're just hearing for the first time. It's like, oh, I thought you were going here, but you went there, and it's even cooler than I
Yeah.
thought. And um, it's just we've we've definitely gotten more excited. Well, we were always excited. Playing music's exciting, but we've realized that we have something pretty special, at least to us and a lot of the people that are close to us. It seems like it's special to us and them. So we have just kind of solidified in that, is like, okay, we actually have something here. This means something to some people besides just us. And
Hmm.
I think that in itself has continued to inspire us to move forward. And like you were saying, that first album took a while to complete, but it wasn't really for lack of ideas or something, or like spending too much time or obsessing too much. It was more just like the logistics behind like us being in separate areas at the time. And
Right. Right.
halfway through that, some of us started living in the same town again together, and then it got easier and things started picking up. And we were able to set deadlines for ourselves and that sort of thing. But all that said, there's no lack of inspiration. Like moving forward onto album number 2, we've already got tons of really solid ideas that we're super excited about, and it just seems to be flowing just like the first one, if not flowing more freely. So
No,
I
very
was
cool.
happy to see that the ideas are still just moving like at rapid pace. So
Nice, nice. And then this a little bit of a step to the side. Um, so twice now I've gotten to sit down and interview Matt Scannell, and I was going through your stuff, and I saw like, oh my God, you played bass with Vertical Horizon for a show.
I did.
And I'm wondering, first off, how did that come about?
Yeah. So I, yeah, for many, many years, I think starting when I was like 18, I started working for a company called Mojo Tone. And they're like a gear supply company within the
Hmm.
music industry. And worked for them for a really long time. Always had a really good relationship with the owners, my bosses. And one of my bosses has just been friends with Matt Scannell since the dawn of time. They used to play shows together in like the Winston-Salem, Greensboro area back in the day.
Oh wow. Okay.
Um, so he's known those guys forever. And Vertical had booked a gig on a military base, Camp Lejeune in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And they found out a few days beforehand that their bassist had gotten COVID,
Oh.
um, and wouldn't be able to make it, or at least not ethically be able to fly across the country and do the show and go onto a
Yeah.
military. So they were like, no, that's probably not a good idea. But so they needed somebody in a pinch, and I think Matt Scannell called my old boss and was like, "Hey, man, we're gonna be in that area. We're kind of in a bind. Do you know anybody?" And my boss threw my name out there, and so I got on the phone with Matt, and he he was like, "All right, cool. I think we're gonna do this. Here's the songs you need to learn." And then 3 days later, I went and played this show with them at Camp Lejeune, and it was pretty rad, man. It was one of the easily coolest musical experiences I've ever had in my life. So
Wow. Wow. So,
yeah.
I mean, did you guys do an extra long sound check where you could, kind of get a feel for things, or?
No, I mean we did 2 songs at sound check, and yeah, that was about it. It was like by the time we
Wow.
did the first song, I mean I studied very diligently to not embarrass my boss by having recommended me, and
Right.
not put them in an even more of a bind than they were already in. And I wanted to make sure that I did it right. It's a cool opportunity to do something I might never get to do again, and I certainly don't want them to have their reputation on the line, because I mean, dude, they're an incredible band, and their bassist is great. And I certainly didn't want
Mhm.
to walk in there on amateur hour like
Right,
that.
right.
So I studied up pretty heavily in those 3 days. So we did those two songs in sound check, and they were like, "Yep, we're good. This is yeah. Do you know the rest of the songs the way you know those two?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And they were like, "We're fine here." So
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's damn impressive that, because not everyone can do that kind of thing, you know?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. At the time, we had just gotten off an All the Pretty Things tour, and not that I was playing bass on that tour, but I had been playing bass a lot, and I always play bass a lot, but I think I was just in a good place mentally to, because like I said, I'd been doing that pre-tour regimen for months
Yeah.
at that point, like, and I was just in good physical shape and good mental shape, and I was sharp, and I feel like the timing couldn't have been more in my favor, because I was just ready to absorb that amount of information in that short of a time period.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it worked out.
And then I'm just curious, I mean, because not many I know you've played in multiple bands, but those were always your bands. It's a different thing to suddenly sit in with, an established act. And I'm wondering, is there anything A, that you took away from the experience that you're kind of now applying to all the pretty things, or B, is there things that maybe you didn't notice as a listener that you noticed now that you were part of the band?
Oh, absolutely, man. So I think the guy's name is Sean Hurley, the bassist that recorded all their
Okay.
stuff. Um, and he is just like industry pro session guy, like a bad man. And so, like, when you're listening to their songs as a whole, you're listening to the melody and the guitar part and just experiencing the song as a whole. But when I started pulling apart some of those songs on bass, I mean, there's a lot more intricacies going on, and a lot more movement happening in the bass register than I would have realized as like a passive listener or something. So
Oh,
there's some really tasteful, very musical stuff going on in their songs. And apart from that, Matt from Vertical is just like the raddest guy on the planet. Like the nice dude. Everybody loves this guy, and you
yeah.
immediately understand why. Just like the biggest sweetheart ever, and just a world class songwriter. I mean, like the guy knows how to move songs along and really do something special. And yeah, I learned a lot musically about, I mean, just stepping into a situation where everybody's like, "Oh man, we're in a bind here, and I hope this works out," and like just maintaining professionalism. And then I also learned a lot from them, because they were able to relinquish trust. Um, once that trust had been established, they were like, "Okay, you respected what we're going through, so now we're gonna respect what you had to do to be able to pull this off." And dude, we just had a great time, and we were cutting up and just having fun backstage, and it's just normal dudes that love what they do, and they get to play some really cool shows on a regular basis. But a lot of what I learned was just like the interpersonal dynamic of, how to treat people well, and treat stagehands well, and showrunners, and just
Hmm.
be that person that, like, anytime you walk away from a show or a production of any kind, Matt was always the guy that, like, everyone had something good to say about him, and there's a lot
Yeah.
to be said for that. So
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And I've only spoken to him 2 times, but the 2 times I did, he was awesome.
yeah, really good dude.
All right. Well, that takes care of all my questions. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
Well, we do have um, a single coming out on the 12th.
Okay.
It's a cover song. It's our first published cover song, and it's by a band called Garbage, and the song is called Special. So it's a little 90s throwback with a little more modern high gain guitar sound to it, so it's kind of like a punched up version of their song.
Okay.
It's
And
different, but
interesting also because Garbage has a female front person. So obviously you had to kind of tackle the vocals in a slightly different fashion.
yeah, we kind of made it more us. The song format is pretty much the same. Because we wanted to honor the song. It's a very well put together song. And it's just a cool song in general. But yeah, we had to, make it a little more driving so that my sort of gritty chorus attack would make sense with the song. And
Yeah.
for a lot of the backing vocals, all the backing vocals really, we had my sister come in and do some female vocal oohs
Oh,
and ahs
wow.
and that sort of thing. And she did a number of things on the first record, the Prose LP, and she is an integral part of the band now. And yeah, she's got a killer voice, killer ear. She just, man, she can fly through a studio session and make things just sound real crispy and clean. It's a pretty
Oh,
cool
cool.
tune. We're really excited about it. So that comes out on February 12th everywhere. So if people want to go check that out, we'd certainly appreciate that.